The galaxy had been quiet for 3,000 years. Not the good kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the terrible silence that follows when someone very powerful decides who lives and who dies. Admiral Taemin stood 12 feet tall on the bridge of his command ship. His body looked like it was carved from black glass, and when light hit him just right, he sparkled like a dark diamond. His eyes glowed with a cold blue light that had been the last thing countless beings across the galaxy had ever seen. He was Vorthak. His people ruled everything that mattered in known space. The Vorthak had always been the strongest. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could stop bullets and survive in the vacuum of space. Their minds worked faster than the best computers. They could live for thousands of years, and they spent those long lives making sure everyone else knew who was in charge. "Report," Taemin said to his second-in-command. Commander Hyejin moved forward. She was smaller than the Admiral, only 10 feet tall, but her crystal skin was clearer, which meant she was younger. "Among the Vorthak, the older you got, the darker your crystal body became. We have completed the survey of Sector 7749, she said. Her voice sounded like wind chimes made of steel. 47 new worlds cataloged. 31 have some form of life, and their classifications. Hyejin held up a data tablet that glowed with alien symbols. 12 worlds marked for immediate extermination. The life forms are too aggressive or unpredictable. 15 worlds contain species suitable for basic labor. Gamma class. 4 worlds have species intelligent enough for advanced work. Beta class. Taemin nodded. This was how the galaxy worked. The Vorthak had divided all life into simple categories. Alpha class was for the Vorthak themselves. The rulers, the deciders, the ones who mattered. Beta class creatures were smart enough to be useful as skilled slaves. Gamma class were good for simple work like mining or farming. And Omega class? Well, Omega class species got wiped out before they could cause problems. It was a perfect system. Clean, simple. It had worked for 3,000 years. "What about the remaining worlds?" Taemin asked. "Empty of intelligent life. We will establish mining operations on 17 of them. The others are useless." Taemin walked to the massive window at the front of his ship. Outside, space was filled with Vorthak vessels. Hundreds of dark, angular ships that looked more like weapons than anything meant to carry people. Each one could destroy a planet if needed. This was the third conquest fleet, and Taemin had led them to victory after victory. In his 500 years of life, he had never lost a battle. His ships had conquered 847 worlds. Some had surrendered quickly when they saw the Vorthak coming. Others had fought back. The ones that fought back were always the most interesting. "For a little while, sir," came another voice. Scout Captain Do-hyun approached, his crystal form flickering with the blue patterns that meant he had urgent news. "What is it, Captain?" "Long-range scouts have discovered something unusual in the Outer Rim. A system with a species that has recently achieved faster-than-light travel." Taemin turned. New spacefaring species were always worth checking out. Sometimes they had useful technology. More often, they had to be dealt with before they became a problem. "Show me." Do-hyun activated a holographic display. A small yellow star appeared surrounded by several planets. One of them was blue and green and covered in swirling white clouds. "The third planet from their star," Do-hyun explained. "They call it Earth. The species calls itself human." The hologram zoomed in to show images the scouts had taken. Taemin saw small, soft-looking creatures walking on 2 legs. They had thin skin, tiny teeth, and no natural armor. They looked fragile, like they might break if you squeezed them too hard. "Pathetic," Hyejin said. "They look like they were designed to be prey animals." "What is their technological level?" Taemin asked. "Primitive," Do-hyun replied. "They have basic energy weapons, simple fusion power, and crude faster-than-light drives. Their ships are small and appear to be built mainly for exploration, not war. They have spread to only a few nearby systems." Taemin studied the images. The humans did look weak. Their cities were built on the surface of their planet, completely unprotected. Their ships looked like toys compared to Vorthak war vessels. Everything about them screamed weakness. "Numbers?" he asked. "Approximately 8 billion on their homeworld. Maybe another million spread across their small colonies. Their military appears to consist of perhaps a few thousand ships at most." Taemin almost laughed. 8 billion creatures that looked like they could barely survive their own planet's weather. A few thousand ships that probably couldn't scratch the paint on a real warship. "Classification?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Do-hyun's crystal body flickered with patterns of certainty. "Omega class, sir." Immediate extermination recommended. They are expanding too quickly for their technological level. If left alone, they could become a nuisance in a few centuries. Estimated time for complete elimination? No more than 1 solar cycle, sir. Probably much less. A single battle group should be more than sufficient. Taemin nodded. It was always the same story. New species would discover space travel, get excited about exploring the galaxy, and then run into the Vorthak. After that, the story ended quickly. Very well. Captain Minho will take Battle Group 7 to handle this. 200 ships should be more than enough for such a primitive species. Sir, Hyejin interjected, isn't that excessive? Battle Group 7 is one of our elite formations. Perhaps a training group would be more appropriate for such weak opponents. Taemin considered this. She had a point. Battle Group 7 had destroyed entire civilizations. Using them against these humans seemed like using a plasma cannon to kill an insect. But there was something to be said for making sure the job was done right. No, he decided. Captain Minho needs combat experience if he wants to advance in rank. Consider it training with live targets. He looked back at the hologram showing the blue-green world called Earth. The humans looked so small and soft. They probably had no idea what was coming for them. In a few months, their world would be quiet and empty, ready for the Vorthak to use however they wanted. It was how things had always been. It was how things would always be. The Vorthak were alpha. Everything else was just waiting to be sorted into the right category before it disappeared. Admiral Taemin had no way of knowing that he had just made the worst mistake in the history of his species. In trying to swat what looked like a harmless insect, he was about to wake up something that would make the entire galaxy tremble. But for now, he simply filed the report and moved on to the next item of business. After all, what possible threat could a few billion soft, weak creatures pose to the masters of the galaxy? Captain Minho felt good about his mission. Leading 200 Vorthak warships to destroy a primitive species was exactly the kind of easy victory he needed to get promoted. At only 200 years old, he was young for a Vorthak officer, and his crystal body still gleamed with the bright clarity of youth. His ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Minho expected to see a few small human ships, maybe some basic defense platforms around their homeworld. What he found instead made him pause. The humans were waiting for them. A massive ship hung in space directly in their path. It was big, bigger than Minho had expected from such a primitive species. The hull was covered in armor plating and weapon ports. It looked like it was built for war, not exploration. Unknown vessels, came a transmission from the human ship. The voice was calm, steady, and spoke in perfect Vorthak language. You are entering human space. State your intentions. Minho was surprised. How did these creatures learn to speak Vorthak so quickly? His scouts had only discovered them 6 months ago. But he pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter. I am Captain Minho of the Vorthak Empire, he replied, using the standard opening for Omega-class extermination. Your species has been classified as a threat to galactic order. Surrender your world and submit to immediate termination, or we will destroy you. There was a long pause. Then the human voice came back, and this time it sounded different, harder. I am Admiral Jiwoo of the United Human Space Force. Unknown aliens, you are in violation of human territorial space. Withdraw immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war. Minho actually laughed. The sound echoed through his ship's bridge like breaking glass. His crew joined in. The idea that these soft little creatures would threaten the Vorthak was the funniest thing they had heard in years. Pathetic beings. Minho broadcast back. You will learn why the Vorthak rule the galaxy. All ships, attack formation. Destroy them. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations, though there would be very few Vorthak left to study it. The human ship didn't run. It didn't try to negotiate. Instead, it opened fire. Beams of energy that Minho had never seen before lanced out from the human vessel. They struck his lead ships and carved through their crystal armor like it was made of paper. 2 Vorthak ships exploded immediately. Impossible, breathed his weapons officer, a veteran named Kyung Min who had served for 800 years. Their energy output? It's off the charts, but that was just the beginning. As Minho's ships moved forward to attack, space around them suddenly filled with smaller human vessels. They came from everywhere. From behind asteroids, from the shadow of planets, even from inside what looked like empty space. The humans had been hiding. waiting. "How many ships do they have?" Minho demanded. His sensor operator, Hei-Wan, stared at her readings in disbelief. "Sir, I count over 3,000 human vessels, and more are still appearing. 3,000 ships. The scouts had said these humans only had a few thousand ships total. Where had they all come from? But there was no time to figure it out. The battle had begun, and it was like nothing Minho had ever experienced. Vorthak military doctrine was simple, and had worked for thousands of years. Form up in perfect lines, advance steadily, and use superior firepower to crush the enemy. It was clean, efficient, and always worked. The humans didn't follow any doctrine Minho understood. Their ships moved in wild, unpredictable patterns. They would charge straight at Vorthak vessels, then spin away at the last second while firing. They worked in small groups that seemed to think for themselves. Some of their ships were tiny, barely big enough for one person, but they moved so fast that Vorthak gunners couldn't track them. Commander So Young led a squadron of these small human fighters. She had been a test pilot before the war, used to pushing machines to their limits. Now she pushed her fighter through moves that should have killed her, dancing between Vorthak energy beams like she was performing some deadly ballet. "Alpha Squadron. This is So Young," she called over the radio. "Target their command ships, the big ones with all the antenna arrays." Her fighters swarmed toward Minho's flagship like angry wasps. The Vorthak point defense systems tried to stop them, but the humans had studied those weapons. They knew exactly how to avoid them. So Young's fighter took a hit from a Vorthak beam. Half her engines went dead. Her life support started failing, and she could taste blood in her mouth. But she was still alive, and her ship could still fly. She could see the bridge of the Vorthak command ship through its crystal windows. She could see the aliens inside, their dark forms moving around in panic as her squadron tore through their defenses. So Young made a choice that would become legend among human pilots. She aimed her dying fighter directly at the bridge and pushed her remaining engines to maximum power. "So Young, what are you doing?" came a voice over her radio. "Showing these crystal bastards what happens when you mess with humanity," she replied. Her fighter smashed through the Vorthak ship's bridge at nearly the speed of light. The explosion took out the vessel's entire command section and killed everyone inside, including the fleet's tactical coordinator. Without their coordinator, the Vorthak formation began to fall apart. That's when Lieutenant Wu Jin made his move. Wu Jin had been a Marine before the war, trained in boarding operations and close combat. While the space battle raged outside, he led 50 other Marines in a desperate assault on a Vorthak cruiser. Human boarding pods, little more than armored shells with engines, crashed into the side of the alien ship. The Vorthak had never dealt with enemies who actually boarded their vessels. Their crystal bodies were nearly indestructible at range, but up close with nowhere to run. Wu Jin and his Marines poured through the holes their pods had made. They carried weapons designed specifically for fighting in the tight confines of a spaceship. Shotguns loaded with explosive shells, plasma cutters that could slice through crystal armor. And when those ran out, they used knives, clubs, and their bare hands. The Vorthak were stronger individually, but they had never learned to fight dirty. They expected warfare to be clean and organized. The humans brought chaos and fury into the corridors of their ships. "Remember," Wu Jin shouted to his Marines as they fought their way through the Vorthak ship. They wanted to exterminate every man, woman, and child on Earth. No mercy. There was no mercy. By the time Wu Jin's Marines were done, the Vorthak cruiser was silent and drifting. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 188 Vorthak ships were destroyed or captured. 12 managed to escape, but they were badly damaged and filled with traumatized survivors who could barely believe what they had witnessed. Minho was not among the survivors. His ship had been one of the first to fall. Admiral Jiwoo stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the debris field that had once been a Vorthak fleet. Her ship was damaged, her crew was exhausted, and she had lost over 400 human vessels in the fight. But they had won. The mighty Vorthak, the self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy, had been beaten by a species they had dismissed as weak and primitive. "Admiral," her communications officer, Lieutenant Yunseo, called out. "We're receiving transmissions from Earth Command. They want to know our status." "Tell them we're alive," Jiwoo replied. "Tell them the aliens underestimated us badly. And tell them—" She looked back at the wreckage floating in space. "Tell them this is just the beginning. When word of this gets back to their empire, they're going to come at us with everything they have. On Earth, President Dongwu received the battle report in his underground command bunker. Around him, his advisors and generals waited for his reaction. "How long do we have?" he asked General Kyung-soo, his Minister of Defense. "Maybe 6 months before they send a real fleet," Kyung-soo replied. "Maybe less." "Then we better get ready," President Dongwu said, "because I don't think they're going to underestimate us twice." None of them knew it yet, but humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened their home. The Vorthak thought they were alpha predators. They were about to learn what a real predator looked like. Admiral Tae-min could not believe the reports from the 12 surviving ships of Minho's fleet. As he listened to the terrified accounts of crystal-bodied veterans who had never known defeat, his own certainty began to crack like his ancestors' armor under human fire. "Say that again," he demanded of Captain Sang-woo, one of the few officers who had escaped the Sol system. "They were waiting for us." "Sir," Sang-woo repeated, his normally steady voice shaking. "Thousands of ships. Weapons we had never seen. They fought like nothing in our records. They destroyed nearly 200 of our vessels." Taemin studied the tactical recordings that Sang-woo's ship had managed to save. The humans moved their ships in ways that defied Vorthak understanding of space combat. They sacrificed individual vessels to save others. They attacked in swarms rather than formations. They seemed to treat their own lives as just another weapon to be used. "This is unacceptable," Taemin finally said. "No species has ever inflicted such losses on the Vorthak Empire. I will mobilize the 7th Conquest Armada personally." His aide, Commander Hee-jin, looked concerned. "Sir, the 7th Armada is our most powerful force. 50,000 ships. Are you certain such measures are necessary for one primitive species?" "They destroyed 200 of our ships," Taemin replied coldly. "They will learn what happens to those who defy the natural order of things." While the Vorthak prepared their massive response, humanity was transforming itself at a speed that would have seemed impossible just months before. General Kyung-soo stood in what used to be the Sahara Desert, watching the construction of the largest military shipyard in human history. Massive machines worked day and night, turning sand into metal, metal into ships. The entire desert floor was covered with assembly lines stretching to the horizon. "How many?" he asked Chief Engineer Young Hee. "At current production rates, we'll have 15,000 new ships ready in 4 months, she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. 25,000 in 6 months. But sir, we're running out of materials. We've stripped every asteroid belt in human space. Then strip them from Vorthak space, Kyung-soo said simply. Young Hee stared at him. Sir, we're not just defending anymore. Captain Yoonji's stealth fleet launched yesterday. They'll bring back materials, intelligence, and hopefully some very confused aliens wondering where their mining stations went. Captain Yoonji had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Taking 12 human ships deep into Vorthak territory to conduct raids was either brilliant or insane. Probably both. Her ships were unlike anything the Vorthak had encountered before. They were small, fast, and covered in armor that bent light around them. Human scientists had learned a lot from studying the wreckage of Vorthak vessels. But they had also developed technologies the crystal aliens had never imagined. Target acquired, reported her sensor officer, Lieutenant Jinho, as they approached a Vorthak mining station orbiting a dead planet. The station was huge, easily 10 times the size of a human city. It was protected by what the Vorthak considered adequate defenses, a few patrol ships and some automated weapon platforms. How many civilians? Yoonji asked. Unknown, Captain. Could be anywhere from 1,000 to 100,000. Yoonji nodded grimly. Before the war, this would have been a difficult decision. After seeing the recordings of what the Vorthak had planned for humanity, it became simple. All ships weapons-free. No survivors. The attack lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, the mining station was a debris field and Yoonji's ships were already jumping to their next target. But they didn't just destroy Vorthak installations. They studied them. Every piece of technology, every tactical system, every weakness was recorded and transmitted back to Earth. Dr. Sang-min received those transmissions in his laboratory deep beneath Seoul. Around him, captured Vorthak prisoners hung in stasis fields while he conducted experiments that would have horrified his pre-war colleagues. Fascinating, he muttered, watching as a sonic pulse shattered a sample of Vorthak crystal armor. Their molecular structure has a specific resonance frequency. Hit it just right and they fall apart like glass. His assistant, Dr. Min Jung, looked uncomfortable. Sir, are we certain this is ethical? They are sentient beings. Dr. Sang-min looked up from his work. His eyes had changed in the months since the war began. They were harder now, colder. Dr. Min Jung, these sentient beings came to our system with the specific intent of committing genocide against every human alive. Ethics is a luxury we can afford after we survive. He turned back to his experiments. Besides, we're learning wonderful things. Did you know that Vorthak crystal bodies can be dissolved completely if exposed to a specific combination of acids? Very useful information. While human scientists learned to kill Vorthak, human engineers built the tools to do it. Admiral Jiwoo walked through the orbital shipyards above Earth, watching the construction of vessels that would have been impossible to imagine before the war. This is the UHSF Retribution, Chief Designer Woo Sung explained, pointing to a ship that was still under construction. It was massive, even larger than the Vorthak command ships, but its hull was covered with weapon ports and armor plating that gleamed like mirrors. How many guns? Jiwoo asked. 3,000 primary weapons, 8,000 secondary weapons, and enough missile tubes to level a continent, Woo Sung replied proudly. The armor is laminated crystal harvested from destroyed Vorthak ships, but restructured to be more resilient. And the engines, he grinned. She'll be able to outrun anything the Vorthak have. What's our total fleet strength? Jiwoo asked. As of yesterday? 12,000 combat-ready vessels with more coming online every day. And Admiral, these aren't the simple ships we had before. These are built specifically to kill Vorthak. 6 months after the first battle, Admiral Taemin arrived at the Sol system with the 7th Conquest Armada. 50,000 ships, the pride of the Vorthak military, the force that had conquered 100 worlds. He expected to find a primitive world cowering in fear, maybe defended by a few hundred desperate human ships. Instead, he found a fortress. The entire solar system had been turned into a weapon. Every asteroid had been hollowed out and filled with missile launchers. Space stations bristled with guns designed specifically to shatter crystal armor. And surrounding it all, a human fleet that had grown to match his own in numbers and exceeded it in pure lethality. Impossible, breathed Commander Hae-jin, staring at the sensor readings. They have... How many ships? 47,000, ma'am, reported their sensor officer. And those are just the ones we can see. Admiral Jiwoo broadcast a message to the Vorthak fleet. Admiral Taemin, I presume. I'm Admiral Jiwoo of the United Human Space Force. You're trespassing in human space. This is your only warning. Leave now or join your previous fleet in the scrapyards. Taemin was too shocked to reply immediately. This wasn't how wars worked. Primitive species were supposed to cower and beg. They weren't supposed to build massive fleets in months and issue ultimatums to their betters. You dare threaten the Vorthak Empire? He finally managed. We don't threaten, Jiwoo replied calmly. We promise. You came here to commit genocide. Instead, you've awakened something your species has never faced before. What? Humanity at war. Last chance, Admiral. Leave our space or become part of it. Taemin made the decision that would end the Vorthak Empire forever. Instead of retreating, instead of negotiating, instead of recognizing that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, he ordered his vast fleet to attack. The Second Battle of Sol began at 800 hours Earth Standard Time on a Tuesday. It lasted 6 months, 13 days, and 4 hours. When it ended, the 7th Conquest Armada was gone, and Admiral Taemin was a prisoner aboard the UHSF Retribution. Jiwoo visited him in his cell once, looking down at the once mighty Vorthak commander. His crystal body had lost much of its luster, and stress fractures ran through his arms and chest. Why? Taemin asked. Why do you fight so hard? You could have surrendered. We would have made your deaths quick. Jiwoo studied him for a long moment. Because you made a mistake, Admiral. You threatened our children. You came to our home with the intent of murdering every human being alive. Did you really think we would just let that happen? She turned to leave, then paused. Your empire classified us as Omega-level threats. You were right about the threat part. You just got the classification backwards. As Taemin sat in his cell, the galaxy was receiving reports that the impossible had happened twice. A species that the Vorthak had dismissed as primitive had now destroyed 2 major fleets and captured one of the Empire's most famous admirals. Humanity was no longer hiding in their small corner of space. They were coming for the Vorthak. All of them. The war had begun in earnest, and the crystal aliens were about to learn what it meant to face an enemy that refused to die quietly. Supreme General Insu stood before the assembled leaders of humanity in the war room beneath Geneva. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of known space, with Vorthek territories marked in red and human space in blue. The red covered most of the galaxy. The blue was a tiny dot in one corner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Insu began, his voice calm despite the enormity of what he was about to propose. "We have a choice to make. We can stay in our space and defend ourselves, hoping the Vorthak will eventually leave us alone, or we can end this threat permanently." President Dongwu leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, General?" Insu touched a control and the red areas on the map began flashing. "Complete extermination of the Vorthak species. Every world. Every ship. Every individual. We make them extinct." The room fell silent. What he was proposing went against everything humanity had believed about itself. They were explorers, scientists, philosophers. "They weren't genocidal monsters, sir," said Admiral Jiwoo carefully. That's what they wanted to do to us." "Exactly," Insu replied. "And if we let them survive, they'll try again. And again, until they succeed. The Vorthak have made it clear that there's no room in their galaxy for both our species." Defense Minister Kyung-soo stood up. "The general is right. We've interrogated the prisoners from both battles. Their military doctrine is simple: destroy anything that might eventually become a threat. They classify entire species as Omega and exterminate them as a matter of policy. There can be no peace with creatures like that." Dr. Sang-min entered the room carrying a tablet full of data. "I've completed my analysis of Vorthak psychology based on our prisoners. They are fundamentally incapable of seeing other species as equals. To them, we will always be animals that got lucky. If we show mercy, they'll see it as weakness and use it against us." The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. The Vorthak Empire had declared war on humanity's existence. Humanity would respond by erasing the Vorthak from existence. Operation Shattered Glass began. 3 months later, Admiral Seung-ho commanded the largest fleet in human history as it jumped into Vorthak space. 200,000 ships, each one designed with a single purpose: killing crystal aliens as efficiently as possible. "First target acquired," reported his navigator, Commander Yu-jin. "Vorthak colony world designated Kresh Prime. Population approximately 50 million. Seung-ho nodded. "All ships assume attack formation. Remember, we are not here to conquer. We are here to exterminate." The orbital bombardment of Kresh Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the planet's surface was a sea of molten glass. 50 million Vorthak were dead, and humanity had announced its intentions to the galaxy. Captain Da-yoon specialized in a different kind of warfare. Her stealth ships didn't announce themselves with orbital bombardments. They simply made things disappear. "Target is a Vorthak research station," her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Hyun-woo, reported as they approached their latest objective. Approximately 2,000 scientists and support staff working on advanced weapon systems. "Any defenses?" "Standard patrol ships and automated systems. Nothing that should detect us." Da-yoon's ships were invisible to Vorthak sensors, coated in materials that absorbed energy and reflected nothing back. They drifted through space like ghosts, getting close to Vorthak installations without being seen. "Deploy the packages," Da-yoon ordered. Her ships released clouds of microscopic machines, each one no bigger than a speck of dust. The machines drifted through the station's air circulation systems, settling on every surface, touching every Vorthak inside. Then they activated. The nanomachines were programmed to disrupt the molecular bonds that held Vorthak crystal bodies together. It was a weapon so horrifying that even its creators were disturbed by it. The Vorthak didn't die quickly. They slowly dissolved, their bodies breaking apart piece by piece while they remained conscious. Within hours, the research station was silent and empty. There were no bodies, no evidence of what had happened, just empty corridors and the faint smell of ozone where living creatures had been moments before. "Package delivered successfully," Da-eun reported to Fleet Command. Moving to next target. News of the research station's disappearance spread through Vorthak space like wildfire. Soon every Vorthak world was reporting strange incidents, ships that simply vanished, colonies that stopped responding to communications, military bases that were found empty, with no sign of battle or struggle. The Vorthak military tried to respond, but they were fighting an enemy unlike anything in their experience. Human tactics were unpredictable, ruthless, and terrifyingly effective. Colonel Jae Hyun led ground forces that specialized in urban warfare. When orbital bombardment wasn't practical, his Marines went in person to clear Vorthak cities. "Remember your training," he told his soldiers as their dropships approached the Vorthak capital world of Vorthak. "These aren't civilians. Every adult Vorthak is a potential soldier, and every one of them supported the genocide of our species. No quarter. No prisoners. No survivors." The Battle of Vorthak was unlike any ground combat in galactic history. Human soldiers used sonic weapons that shattered Vorthak bodies, acid sprays that dissolved their crystal armor, and psychological warfare tactics that turned the Vorthak's rigid social hierarchy against itself. Jaehyun's forces didn't just attack military targets. They systematically destroyed everything that made Vorthak civilization possible. Power plants, communication centers, government buildings, hospitals, schools. If the Vorthak had built it, the humans tore it down. "Sir," reported Sergeant Dasom as she led a squad through the ruins of a Vorthak city. "We've cleared sectors 7 through 12. No survivors." "Good," Jaehyun replied. "Move on to Sector 13. And remember, check the underground areas. Some of them might be hiding in the foundations." The psychological effect on the Vorthak was devastating. For 3,000 years, they had been the predators. They had decided who lived and who died. They had never imagined what it would feel like to be hunted by something stronger and more ruthless than themselves. Vorthak military communications, intercepted by human intelligence, painted a picture of a species in complete panic. "They're everywhere," reported one Vorthak commander whose fleet had been ambushed near the border. "They attack from nowhere, destroy everything, and vanish before we can respond." "How many of them are there?" asked another. "I don't know. Maybe millions of ships. Maybe billions. They seem to have endless resources." The truth was that humanity had learned the secret of Vorthak's success: total commitment to warfare. Human civilization had transformed itself completely. Every factory built weapons. Every scientist worked on military projects. Every citizen supported the war effort. But humanity had advantages the Vorthak had never possessed. They were creative, adapting their tactics constantly. They were individually expendable, but collectively unstoppable. And most importantly, they were fighting for their very existence. The Vorthak were fighting to maintain their dominance. Humans were fighting to survive. Diplomat Yujin addressed the Galactic Council from the ruins of the former Vorthak embassy. Around her, the representatives of dozens of species watched in stunned silence as she explained humanity's position. The Vorthak Empire classified humanity as Omega-level threats, she said calmly. "They came to our space with the specific intent of committing genocide against our entire species. We have responded in kind." "But surely," protested the representative from the Kethvar, "there must be some room for negotiation, some way to end this conflict without complete extermination?" Yujin turned to face the alien diplomat. The Vorthak had 3,000 years to learn mercy. They chose not to. They had the chance to leave humanity alone. They chose not to. They made their choice when they decided we weren't worthy of existence. We are simply honoring their decision. She gestured to a holographic display showing Vorthak territory. Large sections were now marked in gray, indicating worlds that no longer supported life. "We estimate that at current rates of elimination, the Vorthak species will be extinct within 18 months. Any species that attempts to interfere with this process will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The idea that a single species could threaten the entire galaxy would have been laughable just a year ago. Now, with Vorthak worlds going silent every day, it seemed terrifyingly possible. As Yujin left the council chamber, she reflected on how much humanity had changed. They had been peaceful explorers just 2 years ago. Now they were the most feared species in the galaxy, systematically erasing their enemies from existence. But they had made their choice when the first Vorthak ship had entered human space with genocidal intent. Some threats were too dangerous to leave alive. The hunt continued, and with every passing day the galaxy grew a little quieter, as another piece of the Vorthak Empire simply ceased to exist. Marshal Taejun stood in the ruins of what had once been the greatest city in the galaxy. Vorthak Prime, the Vorthak capital world, stretched out before him like a graveyard made of broken crystal. The towers that had once reached toward the stars were now piles of shimmering dust. The streets where billions of crystal beings had walked were empty and silent. It had taken humanity exactly 4 years, 7 months, and 13 days to hunt down every last Vorthak in the galaxy. Now Taijun, who had started the war as a simple captain, commanded the largest military force in galactic history as its supreme marshal. "Final report," he said to his aide, Colonel Sumin, who approached carrying a data pad. "All Vorthak territories have been cleared and confirmed sterile," she reported. "Total enemy casualties, approximately 800 billion individuals. Human casualties, 2.7 million military personnel, mostly in the early campaigns." Taijun nodded. Those numbers represented the complete extinction of a species that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia. 800 billion lives erased from existence because they had threatened humanity's 8 billion. "Any survivors?" he asked. "None detected. Our hunting protocols were thorough. Even the Vorthak and remote mining stations and deep space vessels have been eliminated. The species is extinct." Around them, human soldiers were loading the last valuable materials from the dead world onto transport ships, crystal fragments that would become armor for human vessels, rare metals that would build more weapons. Even the bones of the world itself would be strip-mined to feed humanity's industrial machine. General Kyung-soo, now promoted to Supreme Defense Minister, walked through the rubble beside Taijun. "It's hard to believe it's over," he said quietly. "For 4 years, our entire civilization has been focused on this single goal. And now?" Taijun asked. "Now we decide what comes next." The decision came 3 months later when the reformed Galactic Council met on the neutral world of Kepler Station. The great assembly hall that had once hosted Vorthak speakers now filled with representatives from hundreds of species. But everyone knew who really controlled the meeting. Ambassador Hyo-sung walked to the podium that had once been reserved for Vorthak High Command. She was young for such an important role, barely 30 years old, but she had been chosen specifically because she represented the new humanity that had emerged from the war. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice calm and confident. "The Vorthak Empire is dead. Their reign of terror has ended. The question now is, what replaces it?" The hall was completely silent. Every being present had seen the reports of humanity's systematic destruction of the Vorthak. They had watched as human fleets reduced entire worlds to lifeless rocks. They knew that the small, soft creatures from the blue planet were now the most dangerous predators in known space. "For 3,000 years, Hyo-sung continued, this galaxy operated under a simple principle. The strong dominated the weak. The Vorthak decided who lived, who died, and who served as slaves. They created a hierarchy based on nothing but raw power, and they used that power to commit atrocities on an industrial scale." She gestured to the empty seats where Vorthak representatives had once sat. "We have demonstrated what happens to species that embrace such philosophies. The Vorthak are extinct not because they were weak, but because they were evil. They chose to make existence itself a zero-sum game." A Kethvar representative, one of the silicon-based beings who had served as the Vorthak's most valued slaves, raised a crystalline hand. "What assurance do we have that humanity will not simply replace the Vorthak as galactic overlords?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask but had been afraid to voice. Hyo-sung smiled. "Because we're offering you something the Vorthak never did, a choice. Join the Terran Alliance as equal partners, and share in the prosperity that comes from cooperation rather than domination. Or remain independent, pursue your own path, and we will leave you alone." "And if we refuse both options?" asked a representative from the militant Zorban Confederacy. Hyo-sung's smile disappeared, and for a moment, every being in the hall could see the steel that had carried humanity through 4 years of genocidal war. "Then you had better pray you never give us a reason to visit your worlds," she said quietly. "We tried peaceful coexistence once. The Vorthak taught us how that ends for species like us." Fleet Admiral Jiwoo, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Naval Commander, observed the council meeting from the observation gallery above. Through the transparent aluminum windows she could see the human fleet that guarded the station. Thousands of ships, each one capable of sterilizing a planet. "How many have accepted our alliance offer?" asked Admiral Da-un, who now commanded humanity's intelligence services. 47 species so far," Jiwoo replied. "Another dozen are considering it. The rest seem content to remain neutral as long as we don't threaten them directly." "And the troublemakers?" "The Zorban Confederacy is making aggressive noises, but they're smart enough not to act on them. The hegemony of Kos is building up their military, probably hoping to fill the power vacuum left by the Vorthak. Dayun nodded. Should we be worried? Jiwoo considered the question. Below them, Ambassador Hyo Sung was explaining humanity's vision for galactic governance. Voluntary cooperation between equals, protected by the absolute certainty that anyone who threatened the peace would face immediate and total destruction. No, Jiwoo said finally. Let them build their fleets. Let them make their plans. They'll learn the same lesson the Vorthak did. There's a difference between being strong and being apex predators. On Earth, President Dongwu, now in his second term as leader of humanity's first true galactic government, walked through the memorial gardens in Geneva. The names of every human who had died in the war were carved into black stone walls that stretched for kilometers. His granddaughter, 8-year-old Nyang, ran ahead of him, chasing butterflies through the flowers. She had been born during the war, in the bunkers beneath Seoul while Vorthak ships burned in the skies above. To her, this was simply the world as it had always been. Grandfather, she called back to him. Why are there so many names on the walls? Dongwu caught up with her beside a memorial fountain. Because sometimes, little one, people have to fight to protect the things they love. Those names belong to people who gave their lives so that you could grow up free. Were they brave? Very brave. And they won, which is why you can play in gardens instead of hiding in bunkers. Nayoung considered this seriously, as children do. Will I have to fight like they did? I hope not, Dongwu said, lifting her up to sit on the fountain's edge. But if you do, you'll be ready. That's what it means to be human. Above them, the stars were coming out as Earth's sun set. Among those stars were thousands of human colonies, millions of human ships, and billions of human citizens living lives that would have been impossible just 5 years before. The galaxy was peaceful now. Not the terrified silence that had existed under Vorthak rule, but the genuine peace that came when everyone understood the rules and the consequences of breaking them. Dr. Sang-min, now director of Xenological Studies, published his final report on the Vorthak 5 years after their extinction. His conclusions were stark and simple. The Vorthak had been a species of apex predators who had never encountered anything higher on the food chain. They had mistaken temporary dominance for permanent superiority. The galaxy is full of species that are stronger, faster, or smarter than humanity, he wrote in his report's conclusion. But none of them combined all three traits with absolute ruthlessness when threatened. The Vorthak discovered too late that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers. It's our willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. Admiral retired Jiwoo spent her final years in a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching her grandchildren play on beaches that had once been within range of Vorthak bombardment. Sometimes late at night she would look up at the stars and remember the fear that had driven humanity to become what they were. She never regretted the choices they had made. The Vorthak had forced humanity to become killers, and humanity had proven to be very, very good at it. The children playing in her garden would grow up in a galaxy where no one questioned humanity's right to exist, where the phrase Omega-level threat was remembered only in history books, where the crystal beings who had once considered themselves the ultimate predators were nothing but dust and cautionary tales. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson. Apex predators aren't the ones who think they're at the top of the food chain. They're the ones who actually are. And sometimes, the most dangerous predator looks like prey until it's far too late to run. The Vorthak had learned this lesson perfectly. They just hadn't survived long enough to benefit from it. In the end, that was the most human thing of all. Being underestimated right up until the moment you proved why that was a fatal mistake.